Jake Morrison woke up that Tuesday morning thinking it would be another ordinary day of peace talks and trade negotiations. He had been the human ambassador to the Zephyrian Empire for 3 years now, and had grown comfortable with the routine. The blue-skinned aliens were strange but seemed reasonable enough. They had their crystalline technology and their formal ways of speaking, but they respected the treaties. The Harmony Accords that Jake had spent 2 years negotiating were holding strong. Trade flowed between human colonies and Zephyrian worlds. No shots had been fired between the species in over 18 months. Jake allowed himself to believe that diplomacy really could solve everything. The communication terminal in his quarters chimed at 6 a.m. station time. Jake rolled over in bed expecting another routine trade dispute or scheduling conflict. The Zephyrians were very particular about protocol and timing. Sometimes they would call meetings just to discuss the proper way to call future meetings. Jake had learned to be patient with their bureaucratic nature. It was a small price to pay for peace, but the message was not from the Zephyrian Diplomatic Corps. The transmission came from Captain Lisa Carter aboard the UES Defiance. Her face appeared on the screen and Jake could see immediately that something was terribly wrong. Lisa was one of the toughest ship captains in the human fleet. Jake had never seen her look shaken before. Her uniform was wrinkled and there were dark circles under her eyes as if she had not slept in days. "Jake, you need to see this right now," Lisa said without any greeting or pleasantries. "I am transmitting footage from New Haven Colony. The Zephyrians hit them 6 hours ago." Jake sat up in bed, feeling cold suddenly. New Haven was one of the newest human colonies. It was located well within human space according to all the star charts and treaties. The colony was home to over 2 million people, including families with small children. It was supposed to be completely safe under the protection of the Harmony Accords. The footage that appeared on Jake's screen made his stomach turn. He watched Zephyrian warships descending through the atmosphere of New Haven, like silver arrows falling from the sky. The ships were sleek and beautiful in the way that Zephyrian technology always was, but they were not there for a friendly visit. Bright energy beams lanced down from the ships, turning buildings into molten slag. The orbital bombardment was systematic and thorough. Jake watched entire city blocks disappear in flashes of white light. The worst part was how quick it all was. The colonists barely had time to understand what was happening before it was over. Jake could see people running in the streets for a few seconds before the next wave of energy beams swept across the residential areas. Children were playing in parks one moment and vaporized the next. The Zephyrians did not target military installations or government buildings. They hit everything. Schools and hospitals and shopping centers all received the same treatment. Within 30 minutes of the attack beginning, New Haven Colony was nothing but a collection of glass craters cooling in the morning sun. 2 million human beings had been murdered for no reason that Jake could understand. The colony had been following all the treaty requirements. They had not expanded beyond their designated borders. They had not interfered with Zephyrian shipping lanes. They had simply been living their lives in peace. They hit 17 other colonies at the same time, Lisa continued. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the fury underneath. All of them were civilian targets. No military value whatsoever. The Zephyrians are calling it Operation Cleansing Dawn. They claim we violated some ancient territorial rights that were never mentioned in any of our negotiations. Jake stood up and walked to his window overlooking the diplomatic station. He could see Zephyrian ships docked at the far end of the station. Their crews were probably going about their normal duties as if nothing had happened. As if they had not just committed genocide against millions of innocent people. Jake felt sick thinking about all the hours he had spent in conference rooms with these creatures, all the careful negotiations and polite conversations, all the time he had wasted believing they were civilized. Lisa's transmission continued with more details that made the situation even worse. The attacks had been coordinated across multiple star systems. Human colonies that had existed for decades were simply erased from existence. The Zephyrian fleet had moved with military precision, striking all targets simultaneously. This was not some mistake or misunderstanding. It was a planned campaign of extermination. Among the dead was Ben Hughes, who had been the colonial administrator on New Haven. Jake had recommended Ben for the position 2 years earlier. Ben was a good man who cared about building something positive for human families on the frontier. He had a wife named Mary and twin daughters who were visiting Earth when the attack happened. Now they were the only survivors of their entire family. Jake wondered how he would ever face Mary Hughes again, knowing that his peace treaty had failed to protect her husband and children. The communication terminal chimed again. This time it was a formal request from the Zephyrian embassy. Ambassador Veltar Crystalsong wished to schedule an immediate meeting to discuss what he called recent territorial adjustments. The message was written in the same flowery diplomatic language that the Zephyrians always used. It made Jake want to put his fist through the screen. Jake dressed quickly in his formal diplomatic uniform. The dark blue fabric felt heavier than usual, as if the weight of 2 million deaths was pressing down on his shoulders. He had spent 3 years building relationships with the Zephyrian leadership. He had learned their customs and studied their history. He had believed that understanding between species was possible. Now he was about to meet with creatures who thought nothing of murdering children while they slept. The diplomatic conference room was located in the neutral section of the station. Jake arrived first and took his usual seat at the long table. The room had been designed to accommodate both human and Zephyrian preferences. The lighting was soft and the temperature was kept cool. There were translation devices built into each chair and recording equipment to ensure that nothing was lost in communication. Jake had once been proud of this room and what it represented. Now it felt like a tomb. Ambassador Veltar Crystalsong entered with his usual retinue of assistants and guards. The Zephyrian was tall and thin, with the typical blue skin and large dark eyes of his species. Crystalline implants decorated his forehead and indicated his high rank within their society. He moved with the graceful motions that all Zephyrians seemed to possess. Jake had once found their alien beauty fascinating. Now he saw only monsters wearing elegant masks. Ambassador Veltar Crystalsong settled into his chair with the same careful grace that Jake had observed countless times before. The Zephyrian's translator hummed softly as it calibrated to his voice patterns. Jake noticed that Veltar seemed completely relaxed, as if this was just another routine diplomatic meeting. There was no sign of guilt or concern on his alien features, no indication that he understood the magnitude of what his people had just done. Ambassador Morrison, Veltar began in his melodic voice, I trust you have received word of the recent territorial corrections that the Empire found necessary to implement. Jake stared across the table at the creature he had once considered a friend. They had shared meals together and discussed philosophy and art. Veltar had seemed genuinely interested in human culture and had asked thoughtful questions about Earth's history. Now Jake realized it had all been an act. The Zephyrian had been studying humanity not out of friendship, but to better understand how to destroy them. Territorial corrections. Jake repeated slowly. Is that what you call the murder of 2 million innocent people? Veltar's large dark eyes blinked once. The gesture was the Zephyrian equivalent of a shrug. The human settlements in those regions violated ancient territorial claims that predate your species' arrival in this galaxy. The Empire exercised its lawful right to cleanse those areas of unauthorized occupation. The word cleanse hit Jake like a physical blow. He had studied enough galactic history to know what that term meant when used by powerful civilizations. It was the language of genocide dressed up in bureaucratic terminology. The Zephyrians were not even trying to hide what they had done. They were proud of it. Those colonies were established with your full knowledge and approval, Jake said, keeping his voice steady despite the rage building inside him. We followed every requirement of the Harmony Accords. We stayed within our designated boundaries. We paid all the required fees and taxes. Veltar activated a holographic display showing star charts of the affected regions. The human colonies appeared as red dots scattered across what the Zephyrians now claimed was their exclusive territory. Jake could see that the boundaries had been redrawn to encompass areas that had been considered neutral space just days earlier. Circumstances change, Ambassador Morrison, Veltar explained as if he was discussing the weather. The Empire has discovered historical documents that establish our prior claim to these systems. Your people were squatters who refused to acknowledge legitimate ownership. We gave them the opportunity to relocate peacefully. They chose to remain and face the consequences. Jake knew this was a lie. No warnings had been sent to the colonies. No evacuation notices had been issued. The attacks had come without any advance communication at all. The Zephyrians had simply decided that humans were inconvenient and had acted accordingly. But Veltar continued speaking as if mass murder was a reasonable solution to a property dispute. The Empire recognizes that this situation creates certain complications for our ongoing relationship, Veltar said. We are prepared to offer humanity a generous settlement that will prevent future misunderstandings. The holographic display changed to show a new star map. Jake could see immediately that human space had been reduced to just 4 systems, including Earth itself. Everything else that humanity had built over 2 centuries of expansion was now claimed by the Zephyrian Empire. Dozens of colonies with millions of inhabitants would need to be abandoned or face the same fate as New Haven. "This is your idea of a generous settlement?" Jake asked. His hands were clenched into fists under the table, but he forced himself to remain seated. Starting a physical fight with the Zephyrian ambassador would accomplish nothing except giving them an excuse for more violence. "The Empire could simply exterminate your entire species," Veltar replied matter-of-factly. "Instead, we are offering you the opportunity to serve a useful purpose. Humans are adequate farmers and miners when properly supervised. You will be permitted to maintain breeding populations on Earth and 3 agricultural worlds. Your people will provide food and raw materials for the Empire's expansion. In return, you will be allowed to continue existing." Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach as he realized the true scope of what the Zephyrians had planned. This was not about territory or resources. It was about reducing humanity to slavery. The Empire intended to turn his entire species into livestock. Men, women, and children would spend their lives toiling to feed their alien masters. There would be no freedom, no growth, no future beyond whatever scraps the Zephyrians chose to provide. "And if we refuse this generous offer?" Jake asked, already knowing the answer. "Then, we will demonstrate why the Zephyrian Empire has ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years, another voice said from behind Jake. He turned to see War Prime Kelvor entering the conference room. The Zephyrian military commander was larger than Veltar, with scars covering his blue skin and cybernetic implants replacing one of his 4 arms. Kelvor represented everything brutal about the Empire stripped of diplomatic pretense. "Your pathetic fleet consists of barely 200 ships," Kelvor continued as he took a seat at the table. "Most of them are converted cargo vessels with primitive weapons. The Empire commands over 5,000 warships, each one capable of destroying anything your species has ever built. Your shield technology is laughable. Your weapons are crude. Your tactical knowledge is that of children playing war games." Jake had seen the intelligence reports and knew that Kelvor was not exaggerating. The Zephyrian military was vast and technologically superior in every measurable way. Their ships could travel faster than anything humanity possessed. Their energy weapons could crack the crust of a planet. Their defensive systems had never been penetrated by any enemy in recorded history. On paper, humanity faced certain extinction if they chose to fight. But as Jake sat there listening to the aliens discuss his species like livestock, he noticed something interesting. Both Veltar and Kelvor seemed nervous despite their overwhelming advantages. They kept glancing at each other and their body language suggested tension. The Zephyrians were afraid of something, though Jake could not yet understand what that might be. "I will need time to consult with Earth Command before providing an official response," Jake said finally. He needed to get away from these creatures and figure out what was really happening. The attack on the colonies was just the beginning of something larger and more dangerous. "You have 12 hours, Veltar replied. "Then you will sign the subjugation accords or your species will be exterminated. The choice is entirely yours, Ambassador Morrison." Jake Morrison left the conference room feeling like he was walking through a nightmare. 12 hours to decide the fate of his entire species. 12 hours to choose between slavery and extinction. The Zephyrians had given him an impossible choice, and seemed confident that humanity would surrender, rather than face their overwhelming military might. But Jake had not survived 10 years of deep space diplomacy by accepting what appeared obvious on the surface. He made his way quickly to the secure communication center of the human embassy section. The hallways felt different now, as if the very air had become poisonous. Zephyrian crew members and diplomats moved about their business with the same calm efficiency they had always shown. None of them seemed to know or care that their empire had just committed genocide. Jake wondered how many other species had walked these same corridors knowing they were about to be exterminated. Captain Lisa Carter was waiting for him in the communication center, along with Colonel Steve Martinez and Dr. Amanda Foster. Steve was Jake's military advisor and had been tracking Zephyrian fleet movements for months. Amanda was the team's xenopsychology expert who specialized in understanding alien behavior patterns. Both of them looked as shaken as Jake felt. "Tell me you have some good news," Jake said as he sealed the door behind him. "The Zephyrians have been lying to us from the beginning," Amanda said without any pleasantries. I have been analyzing their communication patterns and cultural records. They have done this exact same thing to at least 6 other species in the past 2 centuries. The pattern is always identical. First contact followed by treaties followed by systematic extermination disguised as territorial disputes. Steve activated a holographic display showing the locations of Zephyrian fleet concentrations. Red dots marked their military positions throughout human space and beyond. They have been positioning their forces for this attack for over a year. The timing was not random. They waited until our fleet was scattered on routine patrols and trade missions. Most of our ships are days away from Earth right now. Jake studied the tactical situation with growing understanding. The Zephyrians had not acted impulsively. This was a carefully planned campaign designed to leave humanity defenseless. But something about their behavior in the conference room still bothered him. Fear was not an emotion he expected from a species that had just demonstrated overwhelming superiority. What are they afraid of? Jake asked. Amanda pulled up another display showing psychological analysis data. I have been studying their body language and speech patterns. Both Veltar and Kelvor showed signs of stress that do not match their confident words. They are worried about something, but I cannot determine what. Maybe they are not as strong as they pretend to be, Steve suggested. Their fleet is large, but it is spread across dozens of star systems. If they had to concentrate their forces to deal with serious resistance, it would leave other areas vulnerable. Jake thought about this possibility, but dismissed it quickly. Even if the Zephyrian Empire was overextended, their technological advantages were still overwhelming. Human ships could not penetrate their shields or match their speed. A conventional military response would be suicide. But Jake was beginning to realize that conventional thinking might be exactly what the Zephyrians expected. They have been ruling this galaxy for 10,000 years, Jake said slowly. They have crushed every species that opposed them using the same methods. Overwhelming force applied against conventional military targets. But what if we do not give them conventional targets to attack? Lisa leaned forward with interest. What are you thinking, Jake? The Zephyrians see us as another primitive species that will either surrender or fight a hopeless war using predictable tactics, Jake explained. They have never faced an enemy that refused to follow the rules they understand. What if we give them something completely different? Amanda was already pulling up data about previous Zephyrian conflicts. Every species they conquered tried to match them ship for ship in direct fleet engagements. The battles were always decisive because the Empire's technology was superior, but there is no record of them ever facing asymmetric warfare or guerrilla tactics. Steve began sketching out possibilities on his tactical display. If we cannot win a conventional war, maybe we should not fight one. Hit and run attacks against their supply lines. Sabotage operations on their outposts. Force them to spread their forces thin, trying to protect everything at once. Jake nodded, but his mind was moving beyond simple military tactics. The Zephyrians controlled a vast empire through fear and overwhelming force. But empires were fragile things when that fear was broken. If other species saw the mighty Zephyrian fleet bleeding, it might inspire them to resist as well. Amanda, I need you to find everything you can about the other species the Empire has conquered, Jake said, especially any that might still have survivors hidden somewhere. If the Zephyrians have been as thorough as they claim, there should be no one left to cause them trouble. But if they have been sloppy or overconfident, there might be resistance movements we can contact. That would violate about 50 different treaties and diplomatic protocols, Steve pointed out. The Zephyrians violated those same treaties when they murdered 2 million civilians, Jake replied. The rules have changed whether we acknowledge it or not. We can either adapt to the new reality or become extinct while following proper diplomatic procedures. Lisa was studying the star charts with new interest. If we are going to do this, we need to move fast. The Zephyrian fleet is still concentrated around their home systems. They are probably expecting us to surrender or launch a desperate counterattack against their main forces. We have maybe 48 hours before they redeploy to hunt down our remaining colonies. Jake made his decision. Lisa, I need you to take the Defiance and every ship you can gather for what will look like a suicide mission. You are going to attack the Zephyrian home system. Jake, that is actual suicide, Lisa protested. They have 300 ships defending their core worlds. You are not going there to win, Jake explained. You are going there to make them think they understand what humanity is doing. While their attention is focused on your attack, the real operation will be happening somewhere else entirely. Amanda was already working on her research assignment. I am finding references to Altarian survivors in the Outer Rim. The Vegan Collective supposedly had hidden colonies that escaped the Empire's notice. There might be others if I dig deeper into the historical records. Find them, Jake ordered, and find a way to contact them without the Zephyrians knowing. If we are going to start a revolution, we need allies who understand what we are fighting against. Jake looked around at his small team of humans preparing to challenge a galactic empire. On paper, it was hopeless. The Zephyrians had superior numbers, superior technology, and 10,000 years of experience crushing rebellions. But they had never faced humans before, and Jake was counting on that inexperience to level the playing field. Jake Morrison's plan was insane, and everyone in the room knew it. Captain Lisa Carter would take 50 human ships in a direct assault on the Zephyrian home system, while the rest of humanity's fleet scattered to carry out what they were calling Operation Pandora. The name was fitting because Jake intended to open a box that had been sealed for 10,000 years and release everything the Empire had tried to keep hidden. Dr. Amanda Foster had been working without sleep for 36 hours, and her research was producing results that shocked everyone. The Zephyrian Empire had not been as thorough in their genocides as they claimed. Species after species showed signs of survivor populations hidden in asteroid belts and dead systems. The Altarians had 1 million people living in converted mining stations. The Vegan Collective maintained a secret fleet of 200 ships. The Centauri Federation had built an entire underground civilization on their supposedly destroyed homeworld. They are all still out there, Amanda reported with exhaustion and excitement in her voice. The Empire has been telling everyone that these species were completely exterminated, but that was propaganda. The survivors have been hiding for decades or even centuries, waiting for someone to give them hope. Colonel Steve Martinez was coordinating with human engineering teams across the fleet. Lieutenant Danny Cooper had volunteered to lead what they were calling the package delivery mission. Danny was young and eager, and probably did not fully understand that he was volunteering for a one-way trip into the heart of enemy territory. But his enthusiasm was infectious, and other pilots were lining up to join his mission. The packages are ready, Steve reported. We have loaded communication arrays and quantum transmitters onto 47 civilian ships. Each one is programmed to broadcast on frequencies that the hidden resistance movements use. If Amanda is right about the survivor populations, this should wake up half the galaxy. Jake studied the tactical display showing the positions of human ships throughout known space. Most of them were converted cargo vessels and passenger liners crewed by volunteers, who understood they might not survive the next few days. The Zephyrians would be expecting desperate military attacks against their main fleet concentrations. They would not be watching for unmarked civilian ships carrying communication equipment to forgotten corners of the galaxy. The timing has to be perfect, Jake emphasized. Lisa's attack on the home system needs to draw their attention at exactly the same moment that our package delivery teams reach their targets. If the Zephyrians realize what we are really doing, they will have time to intercept the messages and hunt down the resistance groups. Lisa was reviewing her mission parameters with grim determination. She would be taking humanity's best ships and most experienced crews into what everyone expected to be a death trap. The Zephyrian home system was protected by 300 warships and orbital defense platforms that could destroy planets. Her 50 ships would be vastly outnumbered and outgunned, but that was exactly what Jake was counting on. How long do you need me to keep them busy? Lisa asked. 12 hours minimum, Jake replied. Long enough for the communication networks to establish themselves and start spreading the word. Once the other species begin to move, the Zephyrians will have bigger problems than chasing down one human fleet. Amanda activated a display showing the psychological profile she had developed for the Zephyrian leadership. Their entire command structure is built around hierarchy and protocol. When faced with multiple simultaneous crises, they will spend crucial time trying to get permission from higher authorities before taking action. Supreme Overlord Zelthek has never had to make rapid decisions because the Empire has always controlled the timing of conflicts. Jake nodded, understanding how this bureaucratic weakness could be exploited. While they are holding committee meetings to decide what to do about the rebellion. Their empire will be falling apart around them. The next few hours passed in a blur of final preparations and coded communications. Human ships throughout the galaxy received their orders and began moving toward their assigned targets. Most of the crews did not know the full scope of the operation. They simply understood that they were about to attempt something that had never been tried before in galactic history. Jake returned to his quarters for a few minutes of rest before the operation began. He looked out his window at the stars and thought about all the species that had looked at those same stars while facing extinction at Zephyrian hands. The Altarians had been poets and philosophers who believed in peaceful coexistence. The Vegan Collective had been scientists and explorers who wanted to understand the universe. The Centauri Federation had been traders and diplomats who brought different species together. All of them had been destroyed because they threatened the Empire's monopoly on power. But they had not been completely destroyed despite what the history books claimed. They had survived in hiding and in secret places where the Empire's reach could not find them. Now Jake was about to give them something they had not had for centuries, a chance to fight back against their oppressors, a chance to reclaim their freedom and their dignity, a chance to show the galaxy that the mighty Zephyrian Empire could bleed. A communication signal indicated that all units were in position and ready to begin the operation. Jake opened a channel to address the human fleet commanders one final time before they scattered to their individual missions. "Today we are not just fighting for human survival," Jake said into the transmitter. "We are fighting for every species that has ever faced extinction at the hands of tyrants. We are fighting for the idea that freedom is worth any sacrifice, and that no empire is too powerful to be brought down by those who refuse to surrender. The Zephyrians think they understand us, but they have never faced humans who have nothing left to lose." Jake closed the channel and prepared to watch humanity either save the galaxy or die trying. Captain Carter's fleet was already moving toward the jump points that would take them into the heart of Zephyrian space. Lieutenant Cooper's civilian ships were beginning their long journeys to forgotten worlds, where resistance movements waited in the shadows. The revolution was about to begin, and Jake Morrison had lit the fuse that would either liberate the galaxy or consume everything he cared about. The next 12 hours would determine whether one human diplomat could really turn an empire to ashes, or whether the ashes would be all that remained of humanity itself. Jake had made his choice, and now the universe would discover what humans were truly capable of when their backs were against the wall. Captain Lisa Carter's fleet jumped into the Zephyrian home system at exactly noon station time. 50 human ships against 300 alien warships and orbital defense platforms that had protected the Empire's heart for 10,000 years. The tactical displays lit up immediately, with targeting sensors and weapon locks as the Zephyrian defenders scrambled to respond to what they assumed was humanity's final desperate attack. Jake Morrison watched the battle unfold from his command center, knowing that every minute Lisa could keep the enemy occupied was another chance for Lieutenant Danny Cooper's teams to reach their targets. The communication ships were scattered across 47 different star systems, carrying quantum transmitters and message arrays to resistance groups that had been silent for centuries. If even half of them succeeded, the galaxy would never be the same. Supreme Overlord Zalthek reacted exactly as Dr. Amanda Foster had predicted. Instead of immediately dispatching ships to hunt down the mysterious civilian vessels that Zephyrian sensors were detecting throughout the Empire, he called for a full military council to analyze the human strategy. War Prime Kelvor wanted to pursue the communication ships, but protocol required approval from 17 different command levels before major fleet redeployments could be authorized. While the Zephyrian leadership argued about proper procedures, Danny Cooper's ship reached the Altarian asteroid colonies in the Vega system. The quantum transmitter activated and began broadcasting on frequencies that had been silent for over 200 years. Hidden receivers throughout the system picked up the signal, and suddenly 1 million Altarian survivors learned that they were not alone. Other species had survived the Empire's genocides. Resistance was possible. Hope was no longer just a memory. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Altarian ships that had been hidden in hollowed-out asteroids for generations began powering up their engines. Mining platforms revealed themselves to be disguised warships. Communication relays that the Empire thought were abandoned began transmitting coordinates and tactical information to resistance cells throughout Altarian space. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy as Cooper's teams reached their destinations. The Vegan Collective's secret fleet emerged from hiding in the Tau Ceti Nebula. Centauri Federation underground cities activated surface weapons that had been camouflaged for 3 centuries. Species that the Empire had declared extinct began attacking Zephyrian outposts and supply convoys with coordination that shocked the alien overlords. Jake received reports from the communication teams as they completed their missions. Each successful transmission was like lighting a fuse that spread rebellion throughout an entire star system. The Zephyrians had maintained control through isolation and fear. Once the subject species could communicate with each other, that control began to crumble rapidly. 43 successful transmissions and counting, Amanda reported with exhaustion and triumph in her voice. The resistance networks are activating faster than we hoped. The Empire is facing simultaneous uprisings on dozens of worlds. But the cost was becoming clear as well. Danny Cooper's ship had been destroyed by Zephyrian patrol vessels after completing its mission. 12 other communication teams had been intercepted and eliminated before reaching their targets. Lisa Carter's fleet was being systematically destroyed in the home system, though they continued fighting with determination that impressed even their enemies. Lisa's down to 30 ships, Colonel Steve Martinez reported grimly, but she has kept the entire home fleet occupied for 8 hours. The Zephyrians still think this is humanity's main attack. Jake knew that Lisa and her crews were dying to buy time for the revolution to spread. Their sacrifice was allowing dozens of other species to taste freedom for the first time in centuries. But it was still hard to watch good people die, even when their death served a greater purpose. Supreme Overlord Zalthek finally realized what was happening when reports began flooding in from across the Empire. Rebellions were erupting simultaneously in star systems that should have been pacified for generations. Species that existed only in historical records were attacking Zephyrian installations with weapons and ships that should not have existed. The careful order that had taken 10,000 years to build was collapsing in less than a day. How is this possible? Zalthek demanded during an emergency council session that Jake was monitoring through intercepted communications. These species were exterminated. Their fleets were destroyed. Their worlds were cleansed. War Prime Kelvor had no good answers. The Empire's intelligence services had believed their own propaganda about successful genocides. They had never bothered to verify that resistance movements were actually eliminated, because doing so would have required admitting that their control was not absolute. The revolution spread like wildfire through communication, networks that had been built in secret over centuries. Resistance groups that had never known about each other suddenly found themselves part of a galactic alliance against their common oppressor. Zephyrian garrison forces that had grown comfortable in their roles as occupiers found themselves facing coordinated attacks by enemies they thought were extinct. Jake made the decision to reveal humanity's role in the rebellion when Zalthek finally offered to negotiate. The Supreme Overlord appeared on the communication screen looking haggard and desperate. His perfect blue skin was marked with stress patterns and his crystalline implants flickered with unstable energy. Ambassador Morrison, Zalthek said without his usual arrogance, the Empire is prepared to discuss revised terms for human integration into our civilization. The Empire is dying, Jake replied calmly. Your choice is to surrender, gracefully or be torn apart by every species you have oppressed. For 10,000 years, Lisa Carter's voice crackled over the communication channel from deep in Zephyrian space where her few remaining ships continued their impossible fight. Jake, you magnificent fool, it actually worked. Their home fleet is in complete chaos, and half their empire is in open rebellion. The final collapse came when the Centauri Federation revealed that their destroyed homeworld was actually a massive underground fortress containing the largest surviving fleet in the galaxy. 2,000 ships emerged from hidden hangars and began a systematic campaign to liberate Centauri space. Other species saw this demonstration of successful resistance and committed their own hidden resources to the fight. Jake stood in the ruins of what had once been the Zephyrian diplomatic station, watching alien species work together to process war crimes and rebuild their shattered civilizations. Representatives from 43 different worlds were cooperating to establish new communication networks and trade agreements. The age of empire was ending and something unprecedented was beginning to take its place. The final irony was that Jake, Morrison had accomplished something the Zephyrian Empire never could despite all their technology and military might. He had united the galaxy not through conquest and fear, but through hope and cooperation. One human diplomat had indeed turned an empire to ashes, and from those ashes the first truly free galactic civilization was being born.